13. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. Thanks be to God for his word. Amen.
Well, good morning, everyone. Psalm 13. For most of this week, I've been struggling to decide whether or not to react to a post that I've seen on a number of Facebook pages. People I know reasonably well, very well, not so well, that appeared this week following Boris Johnson's announcement speech last Sunday evening about some changes to the lockdown, and in particular the instruction for a particular sector of the workforce to go out to work. So people who work in construction and people who work in factories and places like that. The post, or it's the meme, as it were, the kind of the fancy thing with the writing on it, said this, and I'll read it on the screen here. The government can't speak for every single person's situation. These are guidelines. Use your common sense and do what's right in your circumstances. Stop waiting to have every single thing spelled out to you. We're all grown-ups. In other words, stop whining. You're a mature grown adult, make a decision and get on with it. And it was kind of a response to the fairly immediate negative comment that came from a number of quarters about the confusion, the ambiguity, the lack of clarity for some people about the things that Boris Johnson was talking about on Sunday evening. Effectively, he'd given thousands of workers about 12 hours notice, it seemed, to go back to work, but they were not to use public transport, walk if they could, bicycle if they could, etc., etc. And the reason it kind of got me fired up a little bit was that there was this sense that give the government a break at the moment. They're trying to do the best they can with very limited amounts of information. They haven't got time to go away and reflect on these things. They're doing the best they can, and lighten up. Let's play our part in helping to decide what we should do. And that's true, and that's fine, and we need to be sympathetic to our government at the moment for what they're doing. But also, our government isn't the only group of people that have been forced to make incredibly difficult decisions with very little information in very short periods of time. And in particular, with that announcement, was our low-paid workers and vulnerable workers, people in incredibly precarious positions, some who even before the pandemic were on less than the living wage, single parents. You could roll out a whole list of people who would love the luxury of an obvious common sense decision that they could make that was entirely self-evident, and they just do that and life would go on. But for the vast majority of them, they have been left with a choice of appalling decisions just by degree. Okay, I go to work, but who looks after my children or the person I'm supposed to be caring for? If I go back to work, is it safe to go back to work? If I don't go back to work, am I going to lose my job? Will I be fired because my employer may sack me? And it's the kind of statement that can only be said by those in positions of relative security and job security, financial security, and reasonable amounts of comfort. And there was a sense that we have no idea that the dilemma, the pain, the struggles that large amounts of our communities, of our society are currently experiencing. And all this week I was thinking of clever things to write, and in the end I stuck to my usual cowardly rule of not engaging in complicated and difficult debate on Facebook. Facebook's not a good forum for dealing with emotive subjects like that. So in the end, I decided it wasn't the place to engage in. So I'd talk about it here instead. In the middle of the week, I also listened to a student preach a short sermon as part of a sermon class, and it was a very good sermon. And she is a minister in a church not a gazillion miles from here, and she was talking from Micah 6, particularly that passage, what does the Lord require of you? But to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. And she was saying, as a church, that's the question we're wrestling. What does the Lord require of us? And when she got onto the theme of justice, she was brave enough and articulate enough to say that to her congregation, a multicultural congregation, but black majority congregation, that we need to be honest that we're not all in this together. This is not an equal experience for everything. That the black and ethnic minority community have suffered disproportionately in terms of death, but in terms of also of economic hardship and in all kinds of other ways, this virus has disproportionately impacted poorer communities, less well-off communities, the black and ethnic minority community in particular. And we need to recognise that, and we need to articulate that. And the minister said a week or so ago that a number of his church members were saying, we can't wait to get back because we're just going to have the most amazing celebration. And his immediate response to that was to be very, very careful that we are not premature in our celebrations, because not everybody necessarily in our congregation, when they kind of come back, is going to immediately feel like celebrating. They're going to need some time to process the struggles and the pain. For many people, the sense of loss, whether that's been the actual loss of a close family member or a friend, not being able to attend a funeral, those sorts of things, or for other people, our young people who had put their heart and souls into exams and finishing, whether this was the end of year 11 or the end of sixth form, going to university, listening to somebody today whose son had his heart set on a job in the airline industry, and it's just vanished. It's gone overnight. His heart had been absolutely set on it, and it's crushed him. And now people will, over time, will begin to get over these things. But one of the things that is eminently clear at the moment in the midst of this virus, in the midst of this pandemic and virus, is just the sense of injustice and loss that feels indiscriminate, that does disproportionately impact more marginalized people, less well-off people. And what do we do with that? What do we do with that pain? Where do we go with that pain? And this is where, as Christians, we have a place to go, and that's the place of lament. And it's a huge gap in our Sunday by Sunday worship and our normal worshipping life, to express lament. Lament is the ongoing, in fact, I'll read a definition to you from this book, John Swinton's Raging with Compassion. That's a clue. Put simply, a lament is a repeated cry of pain, rage, sorrow, and grief that emerges in the midst of suffering and alienation. It is the uninhibited expression of grief and sorrow, because life has been turned on its head, and people dwell in the midst of that pain and hold that pain and that grief, and they rage and they express their pain. And that is exactly what lament is. It is the language of that gives voice to that we hold within us, that seems to have nowhere to go. And as Christians, particularly as evangelical Christians, we're not very good at coping with that kind of expression of faith in the midst of our worship. Most of us carry it in some degree or others, some for longer periods of time than others. But of course, when we come together on a Sunday, we because of the circumstances, and often because we feel the pressure to be faithful, full of the Lord, full of the joy of the Lord, Christians, and so we don't know what to do with that pain. Someone posted on Facebook a few days ago, feeling out for some songs of lament that they could include in their church's worship, and nobody had any suggestions at all, or hardly any suggestions. We're having to cultivate that, because the strangeness of this is that Scripture is full of lament, absolutely full of lament. And the book of Psalms particularly, I think somewhere it's about a third of the Psalms are in some shape or form an expression of lament. The whole of the book of Job, if you like, is a lament. There's even a book that bears the title, the clues in the title, the Book of Lamentations. It's an absolutely miserable read, but it gives voice to the pain of Israel at a time when appalling things were happening. And lament gets right into the face of God, unashamedly into the face of God. Psalm 13 begins, it doesn't begin with niceties, and it doesn't begin with praise and worship in the way we're supposed to, and say nice things to God. Right now we've got that out of the way, and we've acknowledged once again that God is loving and kind and merciful. Now let's get down to business. Not with Psalm 13. Not if we pick Psalm 13 as our starting point. It goes straight into the face of God. And it says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep the sleep of death. And my enemy will say, I have prevailed. My foes will rejoice because I am shaken." Lament unashamedly comes into the face of God and says, have you forgotten me? Have you not noticed the pain that I am going through? You see, the joy of lament, if you like, or the power of lament, is that it does not diminish the pain. It does not belittle the pain that people experience. It expresses the pain. It gives voice to the pain. It allows the person the freedom to articulate that pain. But the power of lament is the direction in which those who read the psalm, the psalmist, or those people who are struggling with this pain can direct that pain, to direct it into the face of God, to direct it into the face of the one who alone has the power and the capacity to make things right. And it invites us to believe that our God is more than capable of taking it, that we do not serve some tin pot dictator who surrounds himself with sycophants who can only say nice things because of his insecurities and his unwillingness to hear anything unpleasant or nasty about the world in which we live. That the lament invites us to come to that place, to express what is truly on our hearts, to express the pain that we are feeling. In fact, Eugene Peterson entitled a psalm later on, I think it was Psalm 102, his title for it is a prayer of one whose life is falling to pieces and who lets God know just how bad it is. And this is the power of lament. And it is not meant as an expression, stop whining, as a whining of faith, but a heartfelt cry to the one who alone can bring healing and restoration and reconciliation. My world has been disorientated. It has been turned upside down, and you alone are the only place I have left to go who can bring any brightness or any comfort. So that book, Raging with Compassion, it is to rage into the heart of the God who remains a God of compassion, who we believe and trust, who comes to us again, even in the hour of our darkness, in the injustices that we see all around us, and can take it. And not only can take it, invites us. It says throughout Scripture, come, I've even given you the words that you can use. I give you liberty to express. Don't domesticate them, don't polish them, don't sugarcoat them, all of those sorts of things. Feel the true expression of this pain. Because if this pain wasn't as real as it is, why did Jesus have to suffer as much as he did? If the experience of pain in human life is relatively trivial, why the cross? Why the cross? Because that's how deep the pain goes in human experience and the pain that we feel. And so lament is the place that we can go. Lament is the place that we can express all that God has had, so that having expressed it and waited and paused and listened intently to the God who hears, we might also, with the psalmist, conclude at some point, but I trusted in your steadfast love, and my heart shall rejoice in your salvation, and I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. May the Lord hold you and keep you, and may his grace and his peace rest upon you in your joys, but also in your pain and your grieving. May he be with you.